There is no one thing you need to buy. There is no one thing you need to do. You just need to figure out what works for you.
You have good coping mechanisms and strategies, and you're too smart.
That's a much nicer way than they put it, but yeah, absolutely. And there's no set way apart from trying to get some balance. And for me, that means get out of the head, get into the body.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. And who am I? I'm Janine VanStee. I'm an ADHD life coach who likes to support people with ADHD, help them better manage their symptoms, and live the best lives that they can. Today, I'm super excited to have Jonny Cosgrove on the show. Jonny is a repeat founder, a neurodiversity and data protection advocate, and a top global distributed work influencer. Previously, Jonny's entrepreneurial pursuits included events, social media, and data protection. Most recently, Jonny bootstrapped Meeting Room in 2017 as co-founder and CEO, an XR virtual meeting room solution for distributed enterprise teams, becoming a top category solution with Fortune 500 customers, including Shell, Nike, Red Hat, and UBS. While partnering with Meta and Enterprise Ireland, Jonny is currently launching Cleft, an idea capture and sharing tool, which is very focused on the people like us, our neurodiverse population, which Jonny happens to be a part of. So, Jonny, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. You and I had a great conversation not long ago, and we didn't record it. And I said, we need to record our conversations.
We started recording after we said that from there to catch a little more. But yeah, look, I was really looking forward to catch up. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I mentioned, you are part of our neurodivergent tribe, and you are an ADHDer, which is autism and ADHD combined, which is a lot of fun going on there. I know quite a few people who have that combination. It definitely wreaks havoc on your life, but can bring great things to it as well. Tell us a little bit about your diagnosis story and how you live your life with the ADHD.
Well, for the visual processors, I'll just give a little something to think about for a second. I was explaining my conditions and my ADHD to MasterCard a few months ago. They were looking to learn a bit more about what was going on and how we build software and how you might approach building for the edge cases. And I put up an image. It was a GIF from TikTok of all things, and it was just that Wolverine and Deadpool walking side by side as a great definition of, look, they're different systems and they're in the same brain. They don't always get on. Sometimes they make each other better. Sometimes they hold hand and they change the world, and other times they just mean that things get interesting. But yeah, so that was an interesting way of showing things off to the corporate life of things. But where my journey started a long time ago, I think we went through this when we first caught up. But I am definitely a unique edge case in the unique edge cases of things, that I got an earlier diagnosis around, I think, 17 to 20. Wasn't a real thing at that point, unfortunately, as in, you'll grow out of it, or you've already grown out of it. Translation to now, you're dealing with it okay. You're here because you're interested in learning things and whatever.
But so you don't really have it.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah,
it's not there.
You have good coping mechanisms and strategies, and you're too smart.
That's a much nicer way than they put it, but yeah, absolutely. The learning there was, right, put a cap on it. It's not a big thing. Let's go misdiagnose other things and just put a cap in that. And just from a context time point of view, this would have been in the mid-noughties. It literally, you could not have technically autism and ADHD at the same time, depending on the country you're in. And I just had a reminder from one of our first conversations about this, or our first conversation about this, was around the different DSMs, or the different diagnoses criteria, and what's taken on board in the UK and Europe, what's taken on board and not taken on board in the US. And I just remember that was fascinating, taking on board those extra parts. But for me, that meant a delay of about another 10 to 15 years before that referral came through. I know one of your other people on board was talking about the experience in Ireland. And I think what's really interesting, in a country so small, you can still have so many different experiences. Mm-hmm. And whether it's 2 years, or in my case, 15 years. And on the 15th year, I got 2 different referrals in the space of 2 weeks for the same place, because I'd gone at different points and said, hey, I'm doing exactly what I shouldn't be doing if I have what I have, which is checking in, following up, following that stereotype. But anyway, that took to me learning a bit more about the autistic side of my brain, which was a complete curveball for me. It's in my family. I've got a younger brother who is on a very different part of the spectrum myself. But in terms of learning and understanding, I've always been looking at it from one perspective. And then suddenly it came back to myself and it was like, wow, this all makes complete sense. And I know I booked this with the intention of coming and talking about this. And fast forward to the next version and the third and the final attempt, where I went back and started looking at some of my previous notes. Not that there was many of them, even from the amazing item I had, the 15-year mark. And I said, oh, the first 2 pages are about the ADHD. There's a lot more on the other side of things, but maybe we just completely skipped over a very important thing that, again, not because the knowledge wasn't there, the understanding wasn't there for me and the people around me, even those delivering the news. So yeah, that was a whole thing. That led me through an understanding that I've done lots of different kinds of work, starting off in marketing, ending up in data protection, doing my MBA while dropping out of my BA. That's maybe a full podcast on its own in terms of how that actually happened. But these things are how they get there. Ended up working in tech, solved some of my own problems with software around event management, guest lists, and speeding that end of things up. Go figure, you're going and systemizing things. Moved into VR for a number of years. And that was I remember in my diagnosis, when it came up to what do you do for work? I think the way I might, and I'm paraphrasing myself, it was, I'm working on VR software. It's about meeting people in real life, but digitally. And it's about making eye contact without ever having to make eye contact at all.
I love that.
I remember sharing that with my co-founders at the time, and they were like, interesting. Yeah, because we had always talked about the accessibility end of things. If anything, we'd always talked about, we've tried to make sure we had different points of view at our table and than who were there. And then suddenly it was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then fast forward to what I'm working on right now, which is I'm working with a fantastic neurodivergent team ourselves, both neurodivergent and not. That's the whole point of this. We make software that's by us and for us, but not just for us. We don't have to make it binary and put it up there. It's almost like, if you think, and this is not just for Cleft and what we do, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but when you're coming to building product, business, anything with revenue, which is unfortunately what most people drive themselves off, it's how much money is this going to make or save or whatever it might be. We've both been through it, but you from the education side of things, me from all the different areas. And honestly, it comes down to saying, look, if you think about the bottom 20%, or as I would say it, the top 20% who can set the tone for everyone else, then you build a better house. If you think about it, if you're building something with a foundation, you should think at the beginning. How about if we make it the door wide enough for everyone to walk through, roll through, or fly through, whatever your jam is. Let them get in and get to what we're trying to do. And if everyone just started with that base, who knows what might happen. But for us, that was actually our starting point. Myself and Justin, we caught up and got to know each other digitally. And you can interrupt me at any time, by the way, to ask a question. I know I'm going on here and answering your question very long. We met digitally, and we both run businesses online before. We actually got to know each other from a panel during the pandemic. We were both running remote work companies and talking about that and more than likely arguing about it. And then we moved from Twitter DMs to actually chatting in real life to still digitally to starting a company together. No intention other than at the beginning saying, look, we've both done stuff and we shouldn't be shy about that. How about we lean in and see what can be done here while raising some knowledge and understanding? We all know about awareness, but those other 2 points are really key for us to get a point across. And then that led to Cleft, which is about speaking your mind and collecting your thoughts.
And that is amazing. Just that whole process. You've done so many different things and kind of just expanded and expanded as you've gone, which is awesome because we fill the container, right?
Oh, absolutely. And my container, even from a learning point of view, like I ended up out in the States studying. Ended up doing behavioral economics for my version of summer school, was going a little bit deeper, probably again on understanding how do people work? What way are you supposed to do things? What's the template for this? And yeah, it ended up blending a lot through my life. And when I look back, it's like, oh, well, this all makes sense. But at the time, it's like this way and that way. And then it's all building together. But what I'm lucky enough to have got from that is pretty wide perspective and knowing that there's a lot more you can learn all the way along.
Well, I have a friend who says that our life is a puzzle. and we're putting pieces in all the time. We have no idea what the picture's going to be when we get done, and we keep adding pieces until the day we die.
I'll tell you a fun one, actually. When I did, about last year, I had to go and remind myself, and this is something just to share for anyone listening who's not aware of these things. I can forget my favorite things that I like to do. It sounds, I won't say insane. It just sounds very ununderstandable for those who are like, but I like doing a run on a Saturday morning. I like doing X, Y, or Z. For me, I love the work I do, and sometimes I can throw myself into that. I also like doing things, not to the extreme, but I like committing to it. But then if you don't do it for a few days, it could be gone. And for me, that one was, I love jigsaws. And by total accident, I bought a few online on Amazon. I was like, oh, I'll give this a go again. And I bought the same 3 that I used as a kid. I didn't even realize. And my dad came over to visit for lunch or dinner, and it was like, so go figure. Pattern matching 15 years apart or 25 years apart. Go figure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. A guy who doesn't like change, apparently, right?
Ooh, but I also love it. That's the, as I said, Wolverine, Deadpool, hand in hand, and sometimes getting on, sometimes going, what's your problem, dude?
When you talk about forgetting, like completely forgetting about things that you like and enjoy, I've talked about before how like people with ADHD can literally forget friends, people, like that they exist. And it's not because we don't love them. We love them dearly. And when we remember them, we're like, oh my gosh, I miss them so much. I haven't seen them forever. So we can forget some amazing things.
And the other part of that is we can also remember that everyone has their own perspective on things. But I think we've spoken about this before. And if we haven't, it's because I was listening to you doing an awesome podcast earlier on this afternoon about RSD. And that's something that I know personally is something that I have definitely not, I have built it up. I might, if I have time, I'll share a story which definitely impacted over time. But what I'm actually saying is you can forget who someone is, or you can think way more intensely about something that might have happened in the past with someone. And for them, it's like, cool, it's gone. Mm-hmm. For you, you might end up ruminating on it and then forgetting the person that you're trying to remember from what you were saying. So it's really interesting. And there's no set way apart from trying to get some balance. And for me, that means get out of the head, get into the body. You can go all the way energy up. I'm a big believer in energies, whatever your particular vernacular, whichever way you're listening into it. But for me, I know that I can tell when things are too much up here, or in the same way, oh, I'm sitting and it's way too early in the day. This shouldn't be happening, you know?
Yeah, and we talk of, I say it in a lot of my podcasts, this brain up here, we call that the itty bitty shitty committee.
I just held back a big whoop for anyone having to listen to this and then suddenly get on to you saying, hey, tone that lad down, please. It's 8 a.m. in the morning and I'm listening to that. Exactly. I could not agree more.
Yes. Although I have another podcast that you might be interested in where we talk about committee meetings and we bring those itty bitty shitty voices into control and actually use them to our advantage. So
I've got an amazing, since we started speaking actually originally or around the same time, I started looking at the occupational therapy end of things. And that is something that for whether you're ADHD or autistic or whatever your thing is going on, to be very clear, neurodivergence and neurodiversity, it's a wide breadth of things, go figure. Mm-hmm. Lots of different people on the planet. But I know for me, coming at it from the parts point of view and realizing, look, there are very many different parts. And my point in that is not to say, oh, go off and do this particular thing. It's going to work for you. For me, that's a total dislike. What works for me, works for me. There's not a good chance it'll work for you. Some things might get you going, but your run or my run might be your slow walk, whatever the case may be. In the same way, just getting yourself exposed to a different way of thinking for someone who's already gone through the journey. So I think the way of challenging, and I love that, I'm definitely going to be using that in the future, that itty bitty shitty committee. Oh, it's so fun to say. That committee needs to be challenged. And it's not just, I know some people do a board of advisors if they're doing the whole, I'm starting to take over the world. I just say, let's bring it back to the balance point. I have certain people in my life, both friends, family, and professionals who all say, look, I want to challenge that itty bitty committee and make sure they're a high performing team. There's no problem with them being that way as long as you're in control, or you're having a down day. You're like, look, do what you want. I'm sitting on the couch.
Sometimes I envision like these little people up there running around, papers are flying, things are going haywire, and I'm just like, forget it.
You watch Inside Out and you're like, that's a Tuesday. Go home. Come on, this is
I
fine.
love that movie. I love Inside Out. I think it says so much. A great movie for kids and for adults, honestly. But
Well, I
so
think
you,
I was just going to say the thing with all this is I'm sounding, sometimes I almost sound like I'm infantilizing myself, but it's more a case of I like to talk about something I only started talking about quite recently. I know Cleft as a journey for me was actually coming out about this for the first time in public. I actually, I know I've got you to chat to Tyler, I think, but Tyler, one of my co-founders, I did one of our podcasts, and that was the very first time I did it on video, on camera, put it online. That was only about 20 odd weeks ago, back in September. But with Cleft itself, I was using it for a personal point as well, to say, look, I want to make sure that other people can have a better time and learn from others' experience. But the point I'm trying to make is I've done a lot, and I'm not, my imposter syndrome will kick in and say, you're just getting started. You talk about that later. That was part of why myself and Justin came together on this and said, no, like, don't downplay these things. You can be a highly successful executive. You can be a highly successful whatever you want. These things aren't blockers, but learning more about yourself, and this is where I think it's really important, learning more about yourself at any age is good. You should always assume that I haven't a clue. In 10 years, I'm going to look back and go, okay, I've learned. I don't like what I said there. I've grown. That's great. Or I love what I said there. Maybe let's go back to some of that. And I think it's just so important nowadays, especially I'm coming from an Irish perspective. I would love at the basic level to say, hey, every child at 5 and 6 should do a handwriting test. This is in no way scientific. Someone else better than me can figure that out. But there are things like dysgraphia. I know I have definitely been told for years I've got doctor's writing. I'm in no way officially diagnosed, but hey, you don't need to go and learn more every single day. But the point is, putting in small things early on in the education system, wherever you are, would actually end up, like I said earlier, save the local exchequer a couple million to billion in terms of putting people in the right direction in life and giving them supports early, not saying just get on with it,
yeah. And I look at, because I worked in education and worked in special education and was, doing those kinds of things to try to help those kids get a step up. But now I work with an adult population. And the reason I work with the adult population is because there are so many supports in the schools. But once you leave school, even like college, you still have some support there. But once you leave that, it's gone. And people suddenly hit their tipping points at that point and realize, I can't do this on my own. And that's when they find out they had ADHD all along, and they just had great coping and great strategies, and they had people helping and accommodating and doing. And then all of a sudden everything kind of falls apart as an adult. So that's why I like to work with adults now.
That's obviously late diagnosed, early diagnosed. I count myself as a late diagnoser purely because it wasn't a real thing back then. And probably the worst, don't worry about it, is the worst advice you can give. But yeah, you're so right. You can go, I know there are certain services I can't avail of because I wasn't diagnosed before a certain age. It's an arbitrary number. It is what it is. It may change in the future. I know very good advocates who are pushing on that. I know I like to send the emails. I will do the detailed, send a private email. Please have a look at this. And at some point it might raise to the right point. But the point is, the adult population, whether you're in Ireland, whether you're in the US, whether you're in any part of the world, it's not only difficult because there's not enough professionals in the field, depending where you are, it's also different depending on where you are, from the local vernacular to what's said, to what's advised. And Ireland's fantastic. I love it. I'll always shout about Ireland Inc. as a great place to come live here, come work here, export, import, all the good things. But it's a great place to live. It's a great bunch of people. But when it comes to this area of life, we're probably in the medical profession, and there's no shots across the bow, to be clear, it's just a realism. We're probably about 10 to 15, 20 years behind where you folks are. Because where it might be 10 slides over the course of an entire medical degree in Boston. In Dublin, it might be 2. And again, totally picking these numbers out. Please don't someone say, hey, this is all wrong.
This is for visualization purposes only.
There we go. There is a spectrum, like all these things, and some places are amazing. Some places are not so good. And some places, if you go to ChatGPT, it doesn't happen anymore, and I'll send you a screenshot on if I can find it. But if you go to somewhere like Kazakhstan or Google, or sorry, ChatGPT, and I did this a few months back, what has it referred to Like we know in France is it Tada, which is just fantastic. But when it's like, what does it refer to locally, say ADHD in Kazakhstan? It's the first and only time, and I work in AI. I've been working in this immersive space for a decade. And it's the first time I've seen an LLM come back with question mark, question mark, question mark, with a full extra everything around it. It's just, it is not a thing here. And that can just be what it is. Yeah. So again, in the same way, when I was younger, it's not a thing. That's still true in different parts of the world. And in the same way, and the last point I'll make, when you're online, different people, and especially we've got a lot of black and white thinking or flexible and inflexible thinking. And here's my understanding, here's my journey. And then you go online, you see people pulling each other apart for using, I think neurodivergence and neurodiversity is one that I always see being I'll just call it the hot button ticket. There's always a new one every week. But at the end of the day, it's like, look, it's called this here, it's called that there. The point is about raising the game for everyone so that acceptance can kick in. That's it. Doesn't matter what you call something as long as it's not hurting someone else and it's improving someone else's situation.
Yeah, and I used to, when I was in education, I'd say, because I'd have parents who would be like, I want this label for my kid, not this label. This label's, whatever. Because you have cognitively impaired, you have learning disabled, you have all the different categories. And ultimately what it came down to is I said, I don't care what label we put on it, because what's important is the services that they receive. If you change the label, we're not going to change the services. The label doesn't matter. It's the services that matter.
That's what I was even talking about, making sure you have the right supports around. It's not always going to be the same supports all the time. Just to shout out, because I think it's useful to share, I have a coach who I see once a month, sometimes every 2 months, sometimes every quarter. At the beginning, I saw James every other week or every other week for I think the first few weeks, because I really wanted to go figure, hyper focus in on one thing at a time.
Imagine.
But also it was me going, look, I know if I don't keep this up, I might not do as much in the future, or it might not become that routine. I don't believe routines for me are ever going to be something for life. It's something that I'll pick up and lose and forget and come back to. But I'm always building on my system so that happens less or it becomes more optimized. And in the same way, one of the things that actually I literally bellowed about 2 hours before right now, laughing when I was listening to yourself and Rachel, another person here in Ireland, as part of your community. Fantastic episode. I was having so much fun. I haven't finished it yet, just to be clear. But the part that made me bellow and stop and go and actually start recording a Cleft note was when you were talking about the auditory processing end of things. Because that's something I have identified in the last few weeks, that yes, auditory processing is something that I have. There's lots of different parts to it. Definitely don't have time to go into it all. But for me, I'm obviously a verbal. I like to get verbal. I like to think out loud. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, in terms of the work end of things. But on the other end of things, there's more to that. It's what caused that. What is the impact there? I had a pretty significant event back in my college days. I was running an event. It was the big college bowl. And unfortunately, about 6 weeks beforehand, about 25 minutes after we put tickets on sale, I got a call to say, come up to the office here. We're going to have, to this meeting room in the student center. We're going to have a quick chat. For my president, Paul, at the time, we were a student union, and I was doing the NSOF and the things, organizing the community and socials for the year. And this was the big event. And by the end of that meeting, I'd been told that planning permission hadn't been given because somebody in the higher ups had forgotten to put things through, and the bureaucracy of things, education. So we were too close to, here's all the problems, and here's where my fun brain had to kick in. And why I ended up learning, okay, maybe some of this auditory processing stuff was already there, but it was amplified by a traumatic experience. Not to overplay it, but I know for me, that meant that I had to go out and tell 22,000 people. Event's not on.
Wow.
I don't have a solution for you folks. And that's hurting me way more than you folks, and you don't even know. And I also at the time didn't understand. Fast forward through, we can't reapply because the academic crowd can't move things that close to exams and all the things. All makes complete sense. Definitely should have been just sorted and approved. But anyway, it was a half day. Then fast forward to, let's look at other dates. And I was an event organizer. It's what I did. It was where I started my career. So it wasn't hard. It was just with all these different things happening. We can't do this day. And this is, for context, me, senior management. I'm like 22. I've got my team who are amazing. James, Paul, Scott, Pat, all, trying to get the heads around things. We've got the guards. We've got all of the different people, because this is an event for 10,000 plus people. It's not just a small little shindig. And we had the Queen arriving. So we couldn't do that day because we have to have a lot of guards around to do things. We then said, oh, that next date's great, isn't it? Oh, no, that's when Obama is visiting. So again, it was a bit of a deal. And this is all getting closer to the event. I'm also getting quite a substantial, it was before I was one of the first social media people to get, or not social media people, but people online before people understood what identity was. And people just smashed in. And it was all, mass crowd. Don't blame anyone in the past. It was what it was. I laugh sometimes. I shudder at other times. But the point was, all these things going on at the same time as running a campaign in the front end, putting red shirts all over the campus to make sure we want to save our bowl. Fast forward till we got the gig done. We got it all there. We booked cool, big, fantastic acts, had lots of fun. Everyone had a great day. But for me, I never processed that. I just said, right, on to the next thing. Let's go. That's when I ended up over in the States and having a great summer learning about all these different things. Fast forward to a few years later, and I'm understanding, oh, this is auditory processing. This is highly prevalent towards people who are ADHD, who are autistic, and also people who've gone through particular massive traumatic events, millions of people on one Facebook page kind of thing. So why I was sharing that story is not about, the sob story 222. Now what I'm working on is a whole new fun thing, which is, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, SSP, Safe and Sound.
Mm-mm.
So it's, I will do a terrible job of explaining it, so I'll send you a link on afterwards, but it's audio therapy. I put on earphones, these ones for a few minutes a day. It's got some cool, interesting things going on behind. And it moves things. It does things. As I was saying, I do acupuncture quite a bit. And I said, you call this chi. It feels like it's moving things. It feels like something's going right through the middle. And that unlocks the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the point is, that wasn't even on my radar about 6 months ago. So opening yourself up to challenging yourself other things, even if they're a little bit scary, even if it doesn't seem like you need it. It's like, go try it once, maybe try it thrice, and then you'll know. And again, it can lead to really interesting things.
Absolutely. And that kind of what sparked me when you were saying all of that is going back again to that diagnosis thing where they would look at you and say, you did all of that. There's no way you could have autism, no way you could have ADHD, because a person with those things couldn't accomplish all those things. And what a beautiful stereotype breaker to tell that story as well.
Yeah, it was fun. Being a nightclub promoter like I was for a few years after that, while I put myself through my MBA, I had 40,000 people who had my number. And I think it was again, I'm remembering the Rachel conversation where you said you remember the first part of the name and not the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I built up and I didn't realize I was doing things that I thought everyone else did. Some people had a Facebook like the Devil's Wear Prada, and you've got this person over the ear saying, hey, this person and that person. I used to do that before I went out on a night out. I used to do that before I'd meet someone for coffee just to make sure, who are we all meeting? I still do that where I'll say, look, who's going to be there? Not so that I need to know everything. It's more like, I don't want to be rude and completely forget who that person is who I've met 47 times before. It just happens,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about Cleft, because it is such an interesting, it's such a simply positive thing. It's not complex. It's not complicated. It's really fairly simple, but makes a big difference. So tell us about Cleft.
Cleft is about, I should have this quicker, shouldn't I? Cleft is about letting you record your thoughts instantly. Hands-free, wherever that inspiration strikes. But for me, Cleft is, I can't find a sticky note quick enough to write my thoughts down. I press my action button on Cleft. I'm recording because I had to do the face unlock, and I start capturing whatever's on my mind. I'll go off my different directions, and then I'll press stop. It'll do its thing. I might not look at that again until later because I might be in the middle of a different process. But what that actually does is it creates a summarized note of what I said and puts it into text form that I can copy and paste. I can use it as a little digital notebook. Exactly said. It's simple. It's not supposed to be for everything. It's about those quick capture points.
Mm-hmm.
And that means many things to many people. And some people will go, why don't you just use a sticky note? Or why don't you use things? It's like, look, I still have this here beside me every day. I still have all the things I had before. Myself, Justin, Tyler might just have gone off and built something adding to that point. So I'll come back and I'll, at the end of my day, when I'm coming to my workplace or that set down session, I'll go, right, what was I thinking about today? That's awful. That's awful. Oh, that's good. I want to use that again. But what Cleft does for me, I'll give the feeling I got the first time I realized, oh my goodness. Okay, this is number one for me. I was walking around back it was our beta days, not even a year ago, back in I'll say March or May. Yeah, around that period. We just released the iOS version, so on your iPhone. And I was literally walking around my parents' back garden. I'd gone out to catch up for a bit and have a bit of lunch and do the thing. And I stopped and I was like, what is this feeling? What's happened here? I just finished doing a note. And I was like, I'm calm. I know what that means. But how did I get there? I'm not quite sure what happened here. I've been calm before. and I realized, not that I sound like it right now, and then I realized, oh, the itty shitty bitty committee is no longer firing things out. And I actually don't have anything to think about right here and now. Oh, okay. That was gone 30 seconds later because I started thinking about all these things that started exploding in my brain. But the point was, it was something new for me. I always have too much going in my brain. That might result in me speaking too fast. That might result in me bouncing around in different directions. What Cleft means for me is I can capture that stuff without having to worry to act on it right here and now. In the same way, it lets me filter.
And that, I think about how much energy I expend trying to remember things, because having ADHD, I don't have great memory. And yeah, I don't always have something to write it down, and I don't take the time to put it in my phone necessarily because I have to type it in. And so oftentimes I forget things that would be much more easy to just speak into the phone and what you just showed me. And then I could not have to use that mental energy to try to remember that thing because I know I wrote it down, right? So I see that huge benefit just from it would lift weight, from that energy.
That's it. And it was something we started with an intention as opposed to the product. The product came because we kept coming up with different things, and myself and Justin needed to have a better way than not whatever we were doing in Slack at the time. And then it became this, oh, wow, okay. We said we'd never touch note taking or notebooks, but this is a bit deeper. And this is for all, oh, okay, let's go deep in that and see what happens. And then, hey, presto, you have a couple of co-founders who are neurodivergent, hyper-focusing in one direction for a few months. And then what was really humbling and really amazing, to be honest, was when we put our first beta out, it got picked up, and then suddenly we had not just a nice few hundred people going, oh, this is nice. We had thousands of people signing up every single day. And luckily we had some systems in place so we could actually handle that.
Sure.
And then we just started upgrading from there. But when it comes down to now, I was trying to think about this beforehand because we're also trying to refine what we're saying. And it's like, look, the effort is capture and all these things. That's fantastic. But the memory point is those feelings that people feel where it's like, look, I am burdened down by all the stuff I think I have to do or don't know I have to do. Or I'm writing and I'm having a great time working here on this manuscript or whatever I'm doing, that particular item work. But then you get all these ideas. For me, that's where I'll pull out Cleft, and it's going on to my Apple Watch hopefully in the next week or so, all going well. We'll be releasing that pretty soon. But the point is, I can be typing away and doing what I'm doing and staying on focus, on command, or on task and what I'm trying to do. And if something else comes in, I capture it for later and it's there. It's almost like having a team. But the way I always describe it in real life is if I had a team running behind me and could capture all the thoughts. Great, not feasible. And also wouldn't put people through it. But that's it. It makes it simpler. You can have all the good and the bad. Not every idea that everyone has is amazing. I can just I can have that fun of forgetting the best ones or thinking about the one I forgot. So that's where Cleft fits in. Filtering, designed to just be fast. That's the other point. Like we really focus on some of those little, right, it works in an action button. It's got a lock screen widget. It's got all these things just to make sure that whenever you're there, or you could be capturing on any device, your Mac, your iPad. Not that I ever recommend doing anything when you're driving, but I know for me, I have an automatic automation. And this is actually something from forgetting about Cleft for a second. Looking at my tech stack or my support stack is also down to how I run certain things. I have lights for when I'm coming on a call like I am here today, because that gets my brain into, right, at least attempt to slow down, which it obviously did not remember today. But the point is, it sets me up for those different things in the same way I get up in the morning and I do certain things in a row because that sets me up for success.
Absolutely. Now, my big question is, when is it going to be available for Android?
I knew that was coming. It is very, very high on our list. right now we're just focusing on getting a few more things sorted out. Watch is definitely the number one request since we launched. So that is going to be, hopefully, as I said, the next few weeks. And I will be sending you a mail when Justin comes back and tells me when we're going to be looking at it. But it is definitely on the priority list, because we've got a lot of users who, whether they're using it on web or want to use it on web, want to use it in different places. Go figure. There's a lot of different people using lots of different things. But it's also one thing. We said we're a bootstrap team. We're not some big VC funded, let's go off in crazy ways and try and just go off and do all these, not sticking to the mission. And we just said, look, we can plot our own course here. Part of that is making sure we lean into some of our ADHD stuff big time. We actually have another product that we're working on as well at the moment, which is about the writing point. Amber, I'll send you a link and I'll come back and talk to you another time about what we learned from there.
Absolutely.
But that was all about saying, look, people have different functions and different things they want to do at different points. With Cleft, we want to get it right and get that making sure you never lose a thought. With this release, I'm pretty happy to actually say we're very much at that point. So it opens up, let's go and look at different things. But it's the same as anything. You can't go in too many different directions at once, or you'll get absolutely nothing done.
There you go. That's pretty much our life anyway, right?
Oh yeah, that's what we all.
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday, or it's that Thursday of the month. Of course, that's kicking in for me this week because I haven't done X, Y, or Z, and we bring that back in as a team as well. Like, we're pretty blunt and open with each other, and sometimes we're like, we've been talking about this let's get in the call. Let's talk about this because we've been chatting about X, Y, and Z, or we sent this many notes over and back. We could probably finish this in 5 minutes, and that's something that is so. I cannot say how much at home it feels working with people who are just fantastic people. We are all very different. We all do very different things in very different ways, but we come together because we've got a shared intention, which is get on with it and deliver good product, being basic. But again, say what you're going to do, mean it, and go figure. Giving a shit has leverage, and that's something we say enough a lot. Apologies for anyone not wanting to hear a bit of language today, but it really does matter. Going that extra mile is not just something you should do in general, but it's something that makes a good impact on the people around you. And considering honestly, one of the most amazing, I've done a number of businesses and I've never seen a community like this who are so vocal, so understanding, so quick to tell us what's happening and what's not happening, which is great. It's exactly what we need. You could not get this, we could not pay for this kind of engagement, to be perfectly honest, because people care. This is really making an impact to people's lives. But for us, that also puts a huge weight going, everything needs to work all the time. We're still a bootstrap company, but we want to make sure we have high standards. And that just means, as you say, oh, look, it's Tuesday. This is a great conversation. Let's get on with it.
It's a great conversation. And speaking of which, we are kind of reaching the end of our conversation, which has been a great conversation. I always like to ask a question at the end. And I'm going to ask you the question, if you could give a gift to every person in the world who has autism and ADHD, what would that gift be?
Well, outside of Cleft, obviously. What would that be? That's a great one. Wow. Give yourself a break, because that's something you can do for free. As in, look, we will definitely, as a community, think more and do more and wonder more. But I think the main thing is, don't worry about today, going on tomorrow. That sounds like such a platitude. Oh my God, as it comes out of my mouth. There is no one thing you need to buy. There is no one thing you need to do. You just need to figure out what works for you. A very good friend of mine said that a few years ago about nothing to do with ADHD or autism life. Just some people do things and it works. Find what works for you. Like, you don't need to go out and buy that. It could be 10 minutes in the morning. It could be all the different things that someone's going to crucify me if you're saying is Captain Obvious. But it matters. And the small things are something that I know for me personally, not making time for yourself, whatever about the self-worth and all these things, that is actually very much a part of growing up undiagnosed with anything, to be very clear. And I think, as I said at the beginning, giving yourself a break and saying, you're great. You've done awesome things. Okay, you've done some stupid things too, but that's kind of being human. So yeah, that is celebrate all of the wins and acknowledge the bad stuff too. Don't just hide away from it, because that's not going to do anyone any favors. And specifically around anyone who's ADHD and autistic, just to be clear, this is a whole new ball game. Like, again, I could not have been diagnosed this, I think, pre-2013, and I'm not actually sure. Again, depending on where you are, it's going to be different things. There you go. Actually, you've got me there. If I could do one thing for the whole community, give each other a break online. We're a community who don't naturally come together. And that's one of the best things that's happened online in the last few years. I know everyone talks about, oh, this many more people, and it didn't exist back in my day. It did, except insert train joke here or whatever the case may be. there's a lot more to be learned, and we can only do that together. And it's one thing that naturally, and this is a gross overgeneralization, but naturally our community does not necessarily come together or have the opportunity to do that. Go figure. Social skills can sometimes kick in with these things. Online is the greatest power. It's what brought us together. It's how I found you online. And the point is, with all these things, support each other. If that's all we do for the next 10, 20 years, and bring up that, hey, we don't know what this means over in this part of the world. Bring it over here. Show us. Come talk. Let's organize an event. Let's get some people in a room together, or let's get in a call. That's the power I would say we can give each other, as well as what I would suggest to do. That's it. Find your gang. Find your tribe.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, Jonny. This has been a great conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope I can expect another one with you sometime.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. And so if our butterflies on the wall have enjoyed our content, have enjoyed what they've heard, we just need to remind you guys, subscribe, hit the like button, do all of those things so that we continue to get this stuff out for you, because it's great information and we like to share. So with that, we'll see you next time.